Okay, so let's look at line 2. Remember, we're dealing with the shloka form. So we have part A would be line 1 and line 2. So now this is the second line, which is the second line of part A. So again, first we spell. So ta, naro, to, ba, top, na, sa, ne, nya, drengbu, nye, sa, nye, pa, a, gigu, I, pe, da, o, ga, rata, dra, ra, nata, na, ma, sa, nam, pa, ma, pam, ba, yata, ja, sa, j, na, sa, ne. We spelled it. Now we read it out. And I'm going to read it and make my reading fit into the meter rather than how it would be sung in a ritual. Top ne, nye pe, dra nam, pam j ne. So 9 syllables. Top ne, nye pe, dra nam, pam j ne. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Now we've spelled and read, let's parse. So looking at our parsing box then, in the first mini box within the large parsing box, we have top name. Now top is a verb and ne is actually an ablative particle affixed to that verb. So top is the past tense of a verb. So it's extremely common that nasa ne as an ablative particle. There are 2 ablative particles you might remember. They're discussed in the Divine Tree in verses 49 to 52. There are 2 of them, ne and le. Nasa ne and lasa le. Nasa ne can also be a word that means barley, and lasa le is a word that means karma. But as particles, they're ablative, so they discuss or indicate the source of something. Then nasa ne only, not la sale, ne, as we have here, can function a little bit differently than the ablative, which normally modifies nouns and noun phrases like a noun and an adjective combo. But then it also has a verbal use. And that is, I was going to say always, but I don't really want to say always, but it seems to me extremely commonly that it occurs after the past tense of a verb. And that's exactly what we have here. Top is the past tense of the verb o, ta, naro, to, ba, top, meaning as the vocab ident suggests, to gain or obtain, to attain or obtain, I often say, as an easy way to remember it. Okay, so here then we have the idea of having obtained. Okay, so this is not a final verb, but it's a verbal, you could say. So this is attached on to the end of the concept that we left off with in line 1, which is sanamdi tamshezi pani. So now we get this having obtained idea. Oh, so we have by this merit having obtained omniscience. This is starting to make good sense. The way that this is unfolding here underscores the point I made in the last little video, which was that the shays at the end do not mark the end of a sentence, right? Because that by this merit, omniscience was the first line, and then the 2 shays. And then here, having obtained, oh, okay, by this merit, having obtained the omniscience. Okay, then we go on and we find nyepe. So here, nyepa is a noun, which can mean fault or something like that, as we see down below. And here it's to the word nyepa, the noun nyepa, we have agigui, fused, right to that word. It's when we say fused, we mean at TLI, we mean it's been made part of the same syllable. If you took the agigu-e off, that's the genitive connecting particle, relationship particle. If you take that off, you have the noun nyepa. And see, we fuse the agigu-i to it. It doesn't make another syllable. So that's what we mean by fused. It's made into the same syllable. Okay. So then we know by that agigui there's some kind of connection with the concept of the fault with what's forthcoming. And so in effect, a really, really common thing when we find a genitive fused to a noun or following a noun, if it's one of the other genitive particles, you know, the genitive particles are gi, ki, gi, e, and yi. One of the others, it will be a following syllable, but it's still coming after the word. Here it's fused onto the word. But the basic idea is this concept of fault is being connected to the following word. And so let's look into the third blocks and see the following word is da'o gara to draw, enemy, and then ranatanamasanam, pluralizing that. So the enemies then are connected to this concept of fault or misdeeds. Okay. Um, so let's go forward and see what we find as the conclusion of this line. So we've got pama pam, bayata jasa j, and nasa ne, another ablative, pam j ne. So pam is the past tense of the verb to defeat or overcome, to conquer, maybe. J is a really common auxiliary. This is also in the past tense here. And then that's what we want when we see a ne after it. Remember, ne is going to come after the past tense of a verb. So here it's after the past tense auxiliary, and which itself is coming after pom. So this is what I call a three-part verb, pom, j, ne. There's many different ways three-part verbs can be found, but the verb comes at the end, remember? So it's not at the end, the total final end of the entire prayer, but it's at the end of part A. And then part A is somehow subordinate to the main verb and the main clause that's going to be in our part B coming forward. So having conquered the enemies, which are faults, you know, it could be read that way, or, you know, it was translated the harmful enemies, the enemies which are harmful, you know, they're up to no good, in other words. So far we've got by this beneficial activity, sunam di tamche zipani, topne, having obtained omniscience. But so, and also one thing I didn't say very, very often in the prayers, as we saw in the Refuge series, the subject of the sentence, if it's I or we, as it very, very often is in prayers, we're praying for something, we're doing that, the subject of the sentence is not stated. So we have to assume that. Okay. So having obtained, so by this beneficial activity, may I, having obtained omniscience and having vanquished the harmful enemies. Then in the final translation at the top of the page, we put in parenthetically the harmful enemies that we're referring to aren't the people in the next country or neighborhood, but they're the internal enemies of the afflictions such as greed, hatred, and delusion. So that concludes our part A, lines 1 and 2.